Good morning. So I'll first basically talk about Deutsche Post, or basically DHL, who we are. You've probably seen the logo. We have quite a strong branding. But then I'll go on to talk about also what it means to us in terms of the global value chains and how we connect customers within the global value chain. Okay, so it's no surprise, DHL actually is we're actually a post office. We're part of the German post office, Deutsche Post. And there's a significant part of us which is mail, which is normal post. But there's also a significant part of DHL now that's comprised of Express, which is, you probably know Express, buying something on the internet and something gets delivered to your house. That's usually by a courier or an express company. Or then there is global freight forwarding and global supply chain. So freight forwarding refers to the large containers, the sea and so on. And supply chain refers to more the warehousing, right? So we're basically covering the whole gamut of logistics services that you see. Okay, so basically, what kind of portfolios do we have within DHL? As I mentioned, you saw on the left side here, the global mail, which is the postal office. On the right side, we have the express industry, which is the delivery mostly through the air transport. And then you have the other forwarding businesses, the larger containers, either through sea, through air, or even through road. And then you also have the supply chain, which is the warehousing side. Some just basic facts about us. We're quite a large company, actually. We've over 500,000 employees worldwide. We cover over 220 territories. Global group revenue is about 55 billion euros. And every day, the DHL Express basically ships almost 600,000 shipments on a daily basis, which basically means we actually make almost about 600,000 customs declarations on a daily basis. All right. Now, today I'm just going to focus specifically on the express side, right? Because actually there are more issues and concerns that we have on the express side than we have on the normal freight and on the normal ocean side. And basically on the express side, I'll talk more about what the characteristics of the express industry is. But basically, it's all about speed, right? If you buy something on the internet, you want something delivered the next day at a specific time, so pre-9, pre-12, or the afternoon deliveries. It could be purely stuff on the internet. It could be also other things that people use the express industry for, and I'll go into that. So, in terms of Asia Pacific, we are in over 42 countries in Asia Pacific, and with over 34,000 employees. And basically, we have a number of, dedicated flights that we use, mainly air cargos, right? We do not focus on road transport or sea transport simply because of the speed that's required for shipping one shipment from one destination to the other. Okay. So what's our strength like in Asia? We're basically the first company that's actually opened up in Asia in terms of the express logistics industry. And that's simply because our competitors, UPS and FedEx, were initially very focused on the domestic market in the US, so they're very US-centric. So DHL was actually, by its very nature, an international company. So in terms of its coverage, the number of flights, the number of employees, and even in terms of market share. So if you look at the leading market share by value, market share by volumes of shipments that we carry, we still take the lead in terms of the logistics sector. And if you also look at the number of tons that we carry on our flights, basically we are actually still the largest. All right. Okay, so that's just a bit of background on DHL. So we do actually have big overview of the logistics industry as well as the global value chain. Now, the issue is, why is this all important? It's because we work very closely with our customers in enabling the global value chain. All right, so that's critical because this whole partnership with our customers. Now, what have we seen changed over the last few years? If you look at the top flow, right, you have the traditional supply chain model where suppliers supply to manufacturers, supply to distributors, retailers, and consumers, and you probably get that on a country-by-country basis, right? Manufacturers actually manufacturing for the domestic market. Now, what has changed over the last 10, 20 years is where companies are now regionalizing, right? So in the past, you would have a manufacturing facility servicing just the local market. That manufacturing facility now is regionalized to service either a sub-region or a whole region, right? And you get the same for suppliers for domestic for raw materials. You get the same also for who the distributors are, depending on the industry. Sometimes you even get regional distributors rather than local distributors, right? So what does that mean? That means that companies now are now looking at common sourcing, right? Rather than have individual procurement departments, we now actually have regional or global sourcing departments. We have regional manufacturing facilities, right? It's either in-house or outsourced manufacturing facilities. Within companies, functions are consolidated. So sales functions, accounting, you heard about BPO just now, invoicing functions, procurement functions, R&D, and all senior management functions. Warehousing functions become regionalized. And this is all driven by the need for supply chain efficiency, by the more complex nature with which supply chains are now evolving, right? That could be technology related, that could also be issues relating to market access and the requirement to bring your products as fast as possible to market, all right? Now, there's an offside to this. As part of the global value chains, there's also a whole tax issue that's related to that. And that's something we also get involved with our customers. We are not tax advisors, but because we are a service provider to these global value chains, we also get involved. And in some cases, companies actually outsource completely all logistics to providers. Okay, so how does DHL then respond to our customers' needs? Now you actually saw the changes in the value chain, right? This diagram is an example of the process flows within DHL. So at the left side, we actually pick up at shipper's location. The shipment then goes to a local station. Data gets inputted. The shipments get processed. It's either palletized, the customs documentation and prepared, and then it goes to a outbound gateway where the customs submission is made. Right now, before the shipments or the flight actually takes off, data is already submitted to the inbound country, the importing country, and as I talked about speed, right? So data is submitted in advance of the shipment actually moving. So there's a separation of first data and documentation related to the shipment and the physical cargo itself, right? It gets transmitted through the inbound side before the flight's uplifted, and by the time the flight lands, we already hope that the shipment is cleared. So that depends on the efficiency, the cross-border efficiency of customs, and the ability for automation, etc., etc. So by the time the flight lands, when the shipment is scanned upon when we break bulk, what we would like to see is either a cleared status on our IT systems. Before then, we then resort and then deliver directly to the consignee, right? We control this end-to-end supply chain, right? Now, the thing is, when does all this happen? This all happens overnight when everyone's asleep. So when everyone's asleep, all our facilities are busy, right? We pick up as late as 7 p.m. in some cases, 8, 9, or even 10 p.m., depending on manufacturing cycles and manufacturing times. The later we pick up, the better, because we can then maximize efficiency and capacity, right? So when all that is happening overnight, the ideal and focus for us is delivery in the morning, next day. right? Now, of course, it depends on country, it depends on the flight timings, and it depends on connectivity. Okay. What kind of customers actually use us, right? The majority at the moment are a lot of high-tech industries. So those with high value, they would rather fly these shipments through a secure supply chain than to rely on the large, freight orders that you have, all right, and so on. So, why do people use this? Very few reasons. I think some of you may have talked about this yesterday, right? There's customers now don't want to hold inventory. It's money, it's capital, right? They rely on just-in-time manufacturing. They want faster deliveries. Now, there are a lot of R&D samples that also get flown through the Courier and the Express industry, right? And interestingly, there are a lot of SMEs who also use the Express industry. And the reason they use that is because it's easier to rely on a 3PL that manages your end-to-end supply chain if you don't have knowledge of the global value chain. So the market access using a 3PL, using a courier company is much easier. What else do we do? After-sales parts. So spare parts and components is a massive part of the business, right? It could involve warranty products, or it could involve just components where, for example, if there's a breakdown in production or oil or an oil rig facility, there's reliance on actually us bringing a part to service that. And basically secure deliveries, right? So as I mentioned before, where you have very high value shipments, and we've seen that increasingly more so now, the high-tech sector, the microchip sectors, your telecommunication devices and so on, they do actually rely a lot on Express. Now, how do we then get something from A to B, right? DHL has what we call a hub and spoke strategy. So we have global hubs. Within Asia, we have a hub in Shanghai, a hub in Hong Kong, and a hub in Singapore, right? So shipment gets picked up, it gets flown into these hubs from other countries, it is sorted, and then it is flown out again. And the reason why we do that is because it helps us to maximize capacity on all our flights. It also helps to enhance efficiencies, and in situations where you have to manage volumes, right? So for example, if one particular sector has larger volumes, we can then use the hub to manage where there's excess capacity and where there is not enough capacity, all right? So that's purely driven by what you call a efficiency requirements. And it's no surprise that so far the first two hubs that we built in Asia, Singapore and Hong Kong, were themselves logistics hubs or warehousing hubs or basically entrepot hubs within Asia, right? Now Shanghai has come out as new because of the volumes that come out of China, right? So that's been a requirement. Okay, so besides those hubs, of course, what connects the hubs are our flight networks, right? So here I just gave you an example of the flight network that we have within Asia. And the flights between Asia and Americas and Europe. Now, this is absolutely critical, right? The movement of flights, because this is all about connectivity. We don't rely on roads, right? We rely on flight connectivity, right? So the question is the critical mass of flights that are available in a country determines its ability to connect to the global supply chain, basically. All right. Now, for us, for DHL, we rely both on our own planes as well as commercial airlines. Right. Now, the challenge that you have is where in certain countries where you don't get enough flight connectivity, where there are not enough airlines, where there are not enough transport connectivities, and that's the challenge for us in actually getting any form of connection. Okay. So that's in a nutshell our operating model. I just want to quickly run through a study that DHL did that looked at how are countries connected. what are some of the factors that determine connectivity between countries, right? And here is an example of a study, an econometric study that was done by the researchers, this was in Europe, but using global data. Towards the right of this diagram are the factors which positively impact connectivity, and on the left is where it negatively impacts connectivity. And the ones that are circled are those that are statistically significant, right? Of course, not surprisingly, countries who have linguistic commonalities tend to be more connected to each other. But more critically, you also have things like trade policy and transport infrastructure as determining whether countries get connected or not, right? And of course, there is also this whole general issue of business environment, unrelated to the whole concept of connectivity or transportation. If a country generally has open investment environments or very business-friendly environments, naturally a country does tend to get more connected. Now, on the left side, I actually highlighted this issue of violent conflicts. Now, a lot of people talk about political stability. Now, I can tell you that a big determinant for foreign investment by any company is whether there is political stability, where obviously where there are violent conflicts, it does affect the overall investment climate. So what does that mean for us in terms of what we want, right, as a business? Obviously, open investment climates, business, more favorable taxation, and connecting to multilateral trade, right? You have the WTO, you have ASEAN, and from sub-regional perspective, looking at transportation infrastructure, establishing very good EDI, enhanced security, and so on and so on. I think these are not new. These are pretty standard, but I think what I hope to do is to give at least a context in which this actually does make sense to people like us who actually connect countries. So from an express perspective, or even from any transport perspective, right, what do we want? We want speed and reliability. None of our shipments stand still. We provide fully integrated door-to-door services. We have global reach. We have 24/7. But what does that mean from a customs or from a policy angle, right? It's an opening up of the various logistics and service transportation markets. It's conformance to international standards. It's having a trade facilitation mindset, a mindset that is to promote trade and not to impinge on trade, right? It's having simplified clearances, customs 24/7, transparent laws, so on and so forth, right? But in a nutshell, we want the ease of connecting shipments from one to the other on a global basis. The ease of having multimodal transportation flexibility. So, for example, picking something by road, connecting it by sea, or even by flight, and then connecting it by road again, right? And the key is because a lot of this is driven by efficiency issues. We want at least 80% of shipments cleared upon arrival. That means, more advanced customs clearance processes, more simplified, maybe automation, and we want to minimize the shipments that are kept in port because of customs clearance requirements. One area that could be looked at, and we've talked about this, at least the logistics industry has talked about this in other aspects, is to look at the threshold in which shipments become duty-free, right? We call this the de minimis threshold, and in this threshold, below which shipments are duty-free, there is streamlined customs clearance, and there are exemptions from indirect taxes, like VAT and duties. Now, the whole point of this is that the cost of collecting duties actually exceeds the actual duty revenue that's being collected. So what does this, at least from a industry's perspective, this actually reduces the transaction cost, the cost of actually, the trade transaction cost, submitting declaration forms and so on and so forth, and it's aligned with international practice. Now, there was a study that was done under the APEC by the ITS Global, which is an economic consulting service in Australia. They actually looked at the impact of the higher de minimis on the economies, and they actually found that, of course, there was an economic benefit that was actually 10 times more than the revenue loss from the government. And most of the benefit actually came from government savings, which meant that there was less work that was required to do transactional and day-to-day operational work. There was less of that, and a lot of that were the limited resources of governments could be redeployed into the more high-risk, the ones where you had bigger issues, right? So investigation on high-risk shipments, on high-risk traders, and so on and so forth. So if you looked at the de minimis thresholds across countries, across Asia Pacific, I just picked out, a number of them. Of course, you had Japan at 125, Vietnam recently at 48 US dollars, and so on. But the net benefit is actually quite significant, right? They're basically looking at econometric studies. Okay, so in conclusion, basically DHL, we are actually one of the most international companies in the world. Our business is about plugging into the supply chains of our customers. And so part of that is our ability to provide and to support that. Express clearances is just one of that. But we think that in order to help the countries to get everything connected, you do actually need policies that recognize the need to get connected. And some of this actually involves best practice customs reform. And we also think that looking at thresholds in which duty which shipments become duty free, like the de minimis threshold, is actually one way of also looking at connectivity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.